This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When it comes to websites, online stores, etc., there's no place to build a beautiful online presence like Squarespace. If you've been online in any sort of way this year, you've probably heard of a show called Ted Lasso. No, not Ted, silly. I'm talking about Ted Lasso. It swept the Emmys to a point where it honestly got kind of annoying, but after giving the show a watch, I can safely say I fully understand and can get behind why people love this show so much. With Squid Game being everywhere and Succession being the talk of the town these days, I feel like Ted Lasso discourse is going to naturally cool down a bit, but I think it's absolutely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. And for anyone on the fence about starting it, consider this video a starting point for understanding why this show is just so goddamn good. All great shows gotta start somewhere. Ted Lasso starts with a really great pilot. The thing about this show is that a lot of the humor comes from familiarity. It's the same kind of humor and comfort you get out of a well-established friend group that you're a part of or with extended family members. The kind where it's like not that funny, but because you know the person telling the joke, that's what makes it funny. That's kind of where Ted Lasso's humor comes from, and it works so well because of a really well-written pilot. I really love the choice to not show Ted in his home country besides a clip of him dancing. It puts us in this same unfamiliar state as the team. This short scene on the flight tells you all you need to know about Ted's anticipation but lack of fear for his future. The key players of the team are all perfectly introduced. Roy Kent is aggressive and mysterious in all the right ways. Jamie Tart is just an absolute piece of shit. Sam is charming. Then there's the way Nate comes into the picture, a loser that you're rooting for, and then... yeah, I'll say no more. But how Ted immediately finds the kind of relationship he has with Nate is just perfect. You immediately get this father figure thing going on. Not to mention Rebecca being this perfect antagonist that is both very unlikable, yet you kind of just end up feeling bad for her. There's Keely, who's the cute comic relief that somehow exists in a show that's already pretty much all comic relief. There's this guy. If you can't tell, one of the best parts about the show is the extremely fun cast of characters that are all so different from one another, and you never feel overwhelmed by how many of them there are. Like you're working with an entire soccer team, plus like everyone affiliated with them, plus the people affiliated with those people, yet it never feels loaded. And this can all be said about just the pilot, which is only about a half an hour long, which goes to show you just how seamlessly the pilot manages to introduce all of them. But the best character, if we're being honest, is Roy Kent. Roy Kent is just so great. I feel like on paper, guy who gets angry at everything and says fuck a lot doesn't seem like it'd work that well, but this guy never seems to lose his flavor. Probably because he doesn't just read as the same old mean guy you usually see in shows. Over time, a show will take this mean character and break him down, and by the third season, you got yourself one of the greatest character arcs of all time. But the Zuko of Ted Lasso is a different guy. His arc isn't there yet, but he's gonna get there, and I refuse to spoil it for anyone who hasn't watched it yet. But where was I? Throwing Kent in this overly optimistic show that isn't going to show any sort of violence, but is going to make him say fuck as much as possible, it's going to make for some really entertaining TV. And in doing so, also pokes fun at the show's stance on toxic masculinity in a really fun way. Because obviously, the show is much more than just a heartwarming comedy, and Roy's anger isn't that one noted. It's actually a pretty big part of what makes the show great. He isn't just yelling for the sake of yelling. It comes from frustration and passion. His passion to be a good father figure to his niece, his passion to make happy, his passion to bring the best out of his team, even if he has a hard time showing it. Everyone in the show is a complicated person who isn't done growing. The show's entire philosophy is that nobody has ever done growing, but Roy, as you come to learn, is one of the most mature and caring characters in the show. And I'm so happy that the show makes the case that you don't need to be this happy-go-lucky Ted Lasso type of person to be caring and thoughtful. I can't tell you how happy I get anytime I start a show that everyone's talking about, only to find that the episodes are a tight 30 minutes. I'll admit, the episodes get a lot longer the further into season 2 you go, but man does it fly by. There isn't actually that much to say about this section. It's not that deep. The show is just really well edited in my opinion. It's extremely well paced in that it knows when to break into comic relief and when to really hold on our main characters and feel what they're feeling. Ted's panic attacks come to mind as a really great example of how well produced the show is and how it goes above and beyond a lot of TV comedies when it comes to directing, cinematography, and like I said, editing. It's a good show on its own, but the fact that it looks pretty nice is just a great bonus. I feel like if there's anyone that doesn't like the show, it's because it can come off a little corny, which, if you read the title of this section, isn't necessarily a bad thing. See, corniness is usually a bad thing. No, but Ted Lasso has managed to get away with it by staying consistent. Ted Lasso is all about being nice and trying to be a good person, and that kind of premise carrying a theme like that can easily get misconstrued and end up feeling like you're being talked down to by your 4th grade teacher teacher or something, but it's the fact that nobody is ever really being talked down to. Ted himself is kind of corny, but that's just Ted. Watching him try and navigate this new team is comforting because he's corny. The only time you could argue someone's being talked down to is maybe when the therapist gets involved in season 2, but the show does such a great job at having her step back and let the characters find themselves and just have her walk them through that. The show itself, though, never talks down at the audience or its characters. And that's because the show does more with this personality trait than just leave it as wholesome content. I mean, a lot of season 2 is the show using this trait of Ted's, this happy-go-lucky corniness, to break him down in therapy and give reason for why he's like this. It's the show's persistence to be consistently optimistic and quote-unquote nice that not only makes for good television, but also makes the therapeutic experience and breakthroughs that Lasso undergoes just that much more authentic. Which is why I'm glad the show is as corny as it is. Had it not run with this live, laugh, love image, I don't think the show's themes of self-discovery would be taken nearly as seriously. There's a place for shows that can deal with mental health in a way that leaves you feeling kind of upset, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But Ted Lasso isn't that kind of show, and for them to use the cheerful tone to tell these kinds of stories makes it a one of a kind, in my opinion. I originally wrote this section about how the show is apolitical, but the more I thought about it, I don't think the show is entirely apolitical, because while the show does seem to get political every now and then, it focuses less on politics and more on individuality as a means of talking about its ethics. But I don't think the things Ted Lasso isn't saying are what make it good. I think it's everything else Ted Lasso is saying that make it good. Confusing sentence. The show really struck a chord with people a year ago during that time period, because it's so cozy and easy and does not reference any of that stuff, which makes it one of the best comfort watches out there. But it's more than just a comfort show, because the show isn't even as simple as just be a good person or everything's gonna be okay. Especially near the second season, no, this isn't a spoiler, it really starts to not only acknowledge but also accept that no, everything is certainly not okay. But the show isn't attempting to solve or discuss these larger ideas or its stance on why something should be a certain way. Instead, it focuses on the characters, because after all, the characters are the sweetness of the show. I think a good example is the oil company incident, where Sam encourages the entire team to tape over the logo. It's a good move, but the show chooses to focus less on the incident itself and more on the growth within the team that's gained from the incident, because I don't think anyone needs to say why the oil company doing that was a bad thing, and the show acknowledges that. In other less political examples, the show moves in a similar manner, where the way a person handles grief can be very terrible and harmful to the people around them, and yes, that's awful, that's the way life is, but there's also nothing wrong with us for not being able to control that. It's the effort we put into our actions that speak louder. That's what the show is all about. So no, the show isn't entirely apolitical, because it'd be impossible to make a show as human as Ted Lasso without referencing the hardships caused by politics that directly affect the people in the show, but the writers take these topics and shift them into lessons on how the individual characters can respond to them. And as a result, you get a beneficial yet necessary release from the discourse you hear every day on the news, and it keeps the show's greatest quality, which is its consistency. And lastly, there's Jason Sudeikis. I don't think you actually need to say much about this. He just gives a phenomenal performance. He's got the eyes that can tell so many different things. He's a great actor. I feel like most of what I said in this video can age poorly depending where the show takes itself, seeing as though season 2 took us down a very unexpected path, but at the same time, having seen season 2, it's clear that the show, no matter where these characters end up, will just find new ways of telling the same kinds of messages. But messages like keeping a positive mental attitude and be a good person are so simple and not always that easy to follow, which is why a show with this many characters who are all so different from one another isn't really going to have a tough time figuring out the new ways of teaching its audience. And you know what? That's why Ted Lasso deserves the hype. So thanks for watching. Go watch Ted Lasso and form your own opinion. And before you head out, I want to thank this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, Squarespace, if you didn't already know, is a place where you can go online to build your brand, whether that be an online store, a blog, a portfolio. There are a lot of different ways to build that brand of yours. They have a wide array of award-winning designer templates that'll make whatever that website is look fantastic, and they have 24-hour customer service to walk you through any issues you happen to run into. The best part about it all, though, is that if you go to squarespace.com/Karsten, you can get 10% off of your first purchase. So really, there's no reason not to give it a shot. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.